Well, here we are. It's, at the time of recording this, 23:17 of December 31st, 2020. This is the end of a journey that began nearly 50 years ago for the United Kingdom. I'm speaking specifically of our role within the European Union. And although 2020 is ending, and therefore a truly hellish year is over, and while there are multiple vaccines for COVID-19, while things for many people will seem on the up and up, I cannot bring myself to do anything except mourn today. Because in the morning, the transition will be over, and I will no longer be European in any sense, except that of regional proximity, and that is not enough. The deal that this government has established is a thin veneer of a thing, and it's not enough. I know it's better than no deal. Anything is better than having no deal. But at the same time, it's still not enough. Now, I've heard it said, I believe Ian Dunt from the Oh God What Now podcast said it, that this is not the end of our leaving, that this is the beginning of our journey to return, because businesses and other moneyed interests will push for greater integration in the years that follow. But I don't think that's adequate. I really don't. The truth is, we have spent nearly 50 years as a member state in some form or another, and so much is being thrown away in order to satisfy xenophobes and bigots. I am reminded vividly of a lesson of history, and that lesson is, if you can ignore the background noise, that every 100 years or so, for the last 3 centuries at least, Europe has been rent by war. In the early 1700s, it was the War of Spanish Succession. In the early 1800s, it was the Napoleonic Wars. In the early 1900s, it was the First and Second World Wars. And we have avoided war so far in Europe because of the peace that the EU has secured. And I am reminded that the men and women, but let's be honest here, mostly men, who are pushing for Brexit, who have pushed for Brexit, are generally people of a certain age and a certain background. Men who likely believe that if there was another European war, they would be great and valiant heroes. That they would win the war in a day and it would all be over by Christmas. These people have forgotten the lessons of history. After the Napoleonic Wars, men like Otto von Bismarck dedicated their lives to securing something like peace in Europe. They had their own political agendas for doing it, but they saw a reason to do it. They were intent that there should not be another major European war. And indeed, when decades later Kaiser Wilhelm II fired Otto von Bismarck, Bismarck warned the Kaiser at the time that the next European war, the next great conflagration, would start as a consequence of, if you'll pardon the rather bad paraphrasing, some damn fool thing in the Balkans. And that's rather the point. Men like Bismarck foresaw what was going to happen and how it would happen, because they had learned the lessons of history, and they knew that the next generation had not learned those lessons. The men currently ruling my country have forgotten the lessons of history. They have bought into their own propaganda, and they believe they are great heroes, that they are the natural victors. And they have managed to convince a populace to support them in that endeavour. That means that at the end of this night, when transition ends, I will only be able to mourn, because for the first time in my lifetime, the future looks so much more bleak, so uncertain. I remember in 2016, when the referendum happened, everyone was saying that Remain would win handily, that no one would ever expect Leave to win. But I told my friends that Leave would probably win. Not because I thought they had the better case. I voted Remain. But simply because I didn't have faith in the people making the vote. I sincerely believed then, as I do now, that such an important decision should never have been left in the hands of the electorate, because we're a representative democracy. The assumption in that is that the people making decisions, the representatives, are meant to be better informed. When you're leaving such vital decisions to the people can be lied to. They can be manipulated. And I believe that that is what happened. There are those in the Leave camp who voted Leave and now wish they hadn't. They regret it. But it's too late now. If you voted Leave in 2016, your vote was cast. And your regret, quite frankly, means nothing. Because it doesn't change what happened. Whether you bought into propaganda or you did it as a protest, you have a hand in this. And if I may speak personally, I believe that there is some measure of guilt to be laid on your shoulders for every death that may well occur in the years to follow. Because there will be shortages. France and the other European nations recently closed their borders. Not for long, and not as a consequence of Brexit, but as a consequence of a new strain of COVID. And yet, backlogs of lorries going back miles, thousands of lorry drivers. And that was relatively minor. In the end, there will be shortages. There will be suffering, and there may well be deaths. Britain is abandoning the largest trade group in the region, at a time when the nations of the world are going for greater integration because they know it makes sense. Britain is choosing to stand alone. Or more precisely, England is. Because let's be frank here, Scotland voted to remain in the EU. Northern Ireland did too. Wales is a difficult one. Wales has historically always had the misfortune of being dragged along by an English government. So I think it's safe to say that it is England that made the choice and has dragged Wales into the same choice. And because of the power that England controls, Scotland and Northern Ireland are being dragged into something they didn't want. I foresee a time in the relatively near future when Scotland will be an independent nation, when there will be a united Ireland for the first time in many, many, many years. But I do not see the United Kingdom surviving. I think in the long term, this kingdom will cease because it will have no choice. I think one day, and one day soon, it will be brought to a close because of the very same attitudes that have birthed Brexit. English nationalism and English exceptionalism. A remnant of an empire that was not a good time. I'm reminded of stories that I hear of how German schoolchildren are taught about the horrors of the war years, of the Nazi regime. They're taught just how monstrous the men and women involved in that regime were, and they are taught it in unflinching terms. And they are not encouraged to romanticize those events. They are not encouraged to try to ignore them, try to forget the horrors. But the people of Britain are encouraged to do precisely that. We are encouraged to romanticize empire, to imagine that the mistakes of our past somehow are absolved. The common song growing up for me was to hear people chant 2 world wars and 1 World Cup. And that, I think, should tell you everything about the British character. Or again, perhaps just the English character. We romanticize 2 victories in world wars. And yes, those were important victories, but we did not fight them alone. Without the support of our allies, both in Europe and outside of it, we would not have won those wars. Without American convoys in both wars, Britain would have starved. Without the resistance efforts in various European nations, the Second World War could have gone very differently. The truth is that Britain still wallows in its imperial past and has yet to accept that the empire is dead and gone, and it should not be romanticized. I've heard it said that if the EU simply renamed itself the British Empire, then English people would accept it and support it. And I hate to say it, but that might be actually true for some. In the end, I think the time for us to seek return is immediate. I think that at 1 minute past midnight today, we should begin to seek return. It may take 5, 10, 15 or 20 years, but the campaign to return should begin immediately. Politicians will not be able to speak in open terms about it. Keir Starmer will not be able to stand at the next election on the platform of rejoining the EU. And indeed, it's likely that if he did, and even if he won, the EU probably wouldn't want us back that quickly. This is likely going to be a generational change. Brexiters are going to have to, quite frankly, perish from the earth. They're going to have to die and have population change. The sad part about that is that by the time they do, we will have lost the men and women who remember the wars, who remember the events that prompted the European Union. And with their loss, we will forget in some way the importance of peace in Europe. But it is the best we can hope for. And so I think it's something we should strive for. All that being said, if this message, by any chance, reaches any members of the European Parliament, Commission or Council, or indeed any politician in a European state, I have a request on behalf, I think, of every Remainer in this country. Please do not abandon us. Do not hate us. Do not think too harshly of us. We did not want this. We looked at the European project and saw hope. We looked at our cousins across Europe and saw a family of which we were proud to be a part. I've been on marches, I've been part of email campaigns, and frankly, I weep for the loss that tonight represents. So please, do not think that we are like those who would seek separation. We want to be part of this family, and given the chance, we will rejoin. So if one day, whether in a day, a week, a month, a year, a decade or more, you find the British people, or even just one of us, standing at your door, saying that Britain is no longer home for us, please do not turn us away. Because this country is not the home we knew. It is not safe, as has been demonstrated in recent years. In the end, everything has begun to fall apart for us. There will be shortages and there will be suffering, but the Remain voice will remain strong, even as we transition from Remain to Rejoin. So please, don't turn your back on us, especially not in this hour of need. with that in mind, as I am attempting to learn Spanish at the moment, I will sign off with hasta luego y feliz años nueve. And thank you for watching.